Welcome to today's webinar, All Things Migrations, a Q&A with Robert Bryant. I am Jay Martin, your host for the next half hour. Certainly, if you have any questions throughout today's presentation, please add them to the chat or the Q&A section on the right side of your screen. And our super solutions architect, Robert Bryant, will do his best to answer each before the end of the webinar. Certainly, I am not the brains of the operation, but I'd like to introduce Robert Bryant, one of the fine solutions architects at ClearScale. Robert, if you give a nice introduction to ClearScale, as well as a quick overview of your role as well.
Sure. ClearScale is a AWS premier partner, and we have helped hundreds of businesses with migrations, modernization projects, DevOps, security, and lots of things, all cloud related. And I'm a solutions architect here at ClearScale. Been here a little over two and a half years, and I specialize in migrations. And so that's the topic of our discussion today, and looking forward to getting started.
Perfect. Well, today Robert will provide a quick overview of the general migration process, a few case studies, and then we'll throw a barrage of questions his way to test his knowledge. Again, this is a Q&A session and is very much driven by you. So flood our chat and Q&A section with anything related to migrations that you'd like to see answers. At this point, I will gladly hand it over to Robert. And Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And right on cue, my dog starts barking. All right. So today we're going to kind of talk about the migration process, and it's divided up into three topics here for the migration process. The first one being assess. We'll talk about your readiness to operate in the cloud. The next section is mobilize, and that's where you start building a migration plan and identifying any gaps you may have. And the third section is to actually migrate and modernize, if that's what your approach is going to be. So that's the actual migration itself. So we'll start off with the assess phase. And this is really where we're looking at, your preparedness for the migration. And one of the first things that we usually look at, or one of the first things we usually ask, is why are you migrating? And different people come to us with different reasons. Some of the common ones are that you have a data center or on-premise shop, and you have lots of hardware that's either becoming outdated or reaching end of life, and you're at that decision of whether or not to make the capital expense to start replacing those items, or look at moving into the cloud and go with that type of a model. Other reasons may be maybe you need better accessibility nowadays with COVID. Lots of businesses are looking at the change in the working model from people being in the office to now working remotely, and that's kind of disrupted some of the internal networks your company may have built, and so some people are looking to provide a little better accessibility remotely. Or maybe you just need a larger presence. Your business is growing. You need better scalability, better nationwide presence or worldwide presence. And the cloud definitely offers lots of opportunity there. And so those are some of the common reasons why some people need to migrate to the cloud. And so some of the other things we'll look at is your team. Do you have a team in place to handle this migration? Do they have the time required to handle a migration project? This is an area where having a partner like ClearScale can help out. It lessens the impact that the migration will have on your team, because we take some of the heavy lifting off of your shoulders. Another thing we look at when we're looking at the team is the knowledge of cloud computing, and what skills are needed to operate in the cloud versus a data center or on-premise. Another thing that we will look at is the project lead. Do you have a strong project lead that has a good understanding of cloud architecture or the cloud migration process? Again, this is another place where having a partner like ClearScale can help out. Obviously, we have the knowledge. We've done hundreds of migrations, and will provide that project leadership and management throughout a migration. Another thing here is, and this is actually one of the more important ones when people come to us, is do you have a good inventory of what you're wanting to move to the cloud? Whether it be the hardware, the software, the dependencies, how much data do you have, what third-party services do you utilize? This is one of those topics that can have a huge impact on how successful the migration project will go. And if you don't have a good inventory or a good listing of all of these things, that can cause delays or worse, can cause a migration project to fail. And so that's a very important part of the assess phase. And the last one here is how well are you aligned with best practices? And AWS has a well-architected framework that you can look at. It's a good place to start, and I can show that here. So here it's on AWS's website. It's aws.amazon.com architecture/well-architected. And as part of this, there are 5 pillars, or what they call pillars, to assess your concepts, principles, and practices. And so these are operational excellence, the security, the reliability, performance efficiency, and cost optimization. And so those are things that you can look at here and kind of measure how well you are prepared, or how well do you align with those pillars to basically look at this migration project and assess how well you will perform in the cloud. As part of some of those items, some of them are very important up front, such as security. Cost optimization is obviously one of the big reasons people may move to the cloud. But as you get further along in the migration process, you want to start looking at those operational excellence and basically the efficiency of your performance. So moving on to the next slide here. So the next phase that we're going to talk about here is the Mobilize phase. So this is where you actually start planning, refining your business case, and getting ready for that migration. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is understanding how migrating will impact your team. And so here we're going to look at, does your strategy match the execution of your team, or the execution capability of your team? Does your budget match your goals? What type of processes do you have in place now versus how will those be affected after you migrate to the cloud? and understanding your current operating model and the impact that migration will have on that. The next thing that we would look at is, and we talked about this in the previous phase, of knowing your inventory. Well, now in this phase, we have to really understand those applications that you have and dependencies and how they work with each other, or the interdependencies between those applications. And so, in the first phase, we really wanted to discover those applications. Now we really need to understand how they work together, and because that's going to determine what the architecture looks like in the cloud. The next topic is a very important one. Determine the security and compliance requirements. For some people, this is easy. Maybe you have a PCI compliance requirement or a HIPAA, GDPR type compliance requirement. But for some people, maybe you just want to improve your security posture from where it is currently. Follow best practices for AWS, or further, some people have very stringent compliance requirements. Maybe you want to follow NIST 853 or SOC 2 compliance. These are all places, again, that a partner like ClearScale can help out with. We have a security team that's very used to working with these compliance requirements. And maybe you don't have some of the expertise in-house. We can definitely help with that, both during a migration project and afterward with managed services. The next topic here is to explore the need for a landing zone and determine, do you need a landing zone, or maybe for some smaller workloads, maybe not. And to also look at automation to drive best practice. And these are all things that we will look at as part of our project. For any medium to large size projects, we would always start with a landing zone. And typically nowadays we would use Control Tower, which is a managed landing zone by AWS. And it helps with driving best practice and security and compliance and governance, and has a lot of capability built in from the beginning, and provides a good platform to build off of. And so those are an important area to look at early on in the planning process. And then the last step here is really just to develop a plan. It may sound really simple, but looking at what will you move first. Is there I guess first of all, is this going to be a multi-step process, or is the environment small enough that you can move it all in one step? This is another area where AWS has a good strategy for, and it's called the 6 R's. It's 6 application migration strategies. And some of these you may have heard in one way or another. The first one is rehost, commonly referred to as lift and shift. Basically, this is just taking what you have now and moving it to AWS as is. The next one is re-platform, sometimes referred to as lift, tinker, and shift. So this is basically where you're taking what you have now and maybe moving it to another service, like a managed service. A good example is taking a database and moving it to Amazon's RDS, or relational database service. So services like that, or they have many managed services. Services like that basically take some of the load off of you as far as management or maybe hardware decisions, and basically gives you some choices that you need to choose, but allows or automates some of the management of those services. The next one is to refactor or re-architect your application. So this is where you're getting into a little bit more work, and maybe you have a really old application, a monolithic design, and you want to refactor it to be take advantage of microservices or containerize your application. So that's refactoring. The fourth one is to repurchase your application, and so this is where you take a application internal, maybe your internal application now, and move it to a completely different type of system. And a good one they use here is maybe you had an internal CRM platform, and now you're going to move to Salesforce.com or some other service, software as a service model. So that would be repurchase. Fifth option is just to retire, to basically take an application that's no longer needed, and as you move to the cloud, basically just turn that system off. And the last R is retain, basically to stay where you're at and revisit it at a later point in time. And so those are the 6 R's. And so that's a good place to look at as part of your planning phase or planning the task here. The next phase is the migrate and modernize phase. And so this is where you're actually going to perform your migration. And typically in our migration projects, we take the approach of design, migrate, validate, and I like to add in cut over each application to the cloud. And again, depending on the size of the environment or other factors as far as independencies and things like that, you can decide whether you're going to do this one application at a time or do all applications at once. And but basically repeating that process, if you're doing them one at a time, to design, migrate, validate each application, and kind of run through that cycle over and over again until all of your applications are in the cloud. So that's a pretty common way of approaching that. And AWS has some good tools. We use many of these for our migration projects. And a good place to start is the Migration Hub. And the Migration Hub is really a set of tools that help you move along the or even manage your migration. It starts out with some discovery tools that help you discover your applications, their dependencies, and kind of looks for all the parts of your environment that will need to be migrated. And it then walks through other phases and has tools to actually help you move your applications or databases or parts of your inventory into the cloud. Some of those tools will be AWS Data Sync, the Snow family of devices. Those are either servers or little hard drives that you can get from AWS to copy your data and move it securely to AWS. Two very common tools that we use are the AWS Server Migration Service and the Database Migration Service. So again, lots of good tools here. There are some third-party products out there that can help you as well. But generally these are very good products, and we use them in many projects. And that brings us to some offerings that ClearScale has. So we offer a migration readiness assessment. It's a 1 day, or really less than 1 day, assessment where we'll look at challenges you may be facing, establish any capability gaps, determine your migration readiness, and then determine the next steps. And so it's a good place to start if you're not sure on how to get started on your migration journey. Another offering we have is migration planning. So this is typically a 4-week engagement where we will help you establish a business case. We'll look at the total cost of ownership and the return on investment forecast for operating in the cloud. We can do a pilot migration of 1 to 2 small applications, just so you get comfortable with the process of migrating applications to the cloud, and then establish readiness for scale, to move either more applications or to get ready to handle a larger production workload. And then the last offering here is just our typical migration execution, where we help you migrate to the cloud. And so this can be for medium to large scale migrations. Maybe as part of this, you can be optimizing, modernizing both the applications and or your processes, such as CI/CD pipelines, or just other infrastructure automation. And so here we have a couple of case studies on our website. If you go to our website, case studies are featured very prominently, and we have lots and lots of good case studies that if you want to look at. This is one we did for Ebates. They were kind of outgrowing their infrastructure, didn't have any scalability or elasticity built into their architecture. So we helped them develop a new architecture, new infrastructure automation, move to Kubernetes, and helped them with that containerization. And it was a very successful project, and they've been a long-term customer of ours. Another one here is for Caramedics, a HIPAA compliant environment that we helped build for them. Again, set up infrastructure automation, built out their infrastructure in AWS, put in some deployment pipelines, and migrated them to the cloud. And the last one here was a communication company. They were needing to expand to meet customer demand. So we helped them migrate all of their platform from Rackspace to AWS. Again, kind of the same process of building automation, did a little bit of modernizing the infrastructure, and got them into AWS as well. And so now we're going to open up here for questions.
Yeah, excellent stuff, Robert. Again, thank you for the quick and thorough review of migrations. And now on to the exciting part, our crowdsourced questions. So let's start with some of these softballs. Does my team need to gain certifications or specific knowledge before working with a partner like ClearScale to migrate?
No, I mean, that's one of the advantages of working with a partner, is that we can help you through the process. And during our projects, we like it to be a interactive approach, and so there's often lots of knowledge transfer from our team, who does this every day, to your team to help them along the way. And so definitely, going out and getting certified is not a requirement.
What is the most common culprit for slowing down or preventing a migration?
This is a common one. I touched on this earlier, and the most common culprit that kind of derails a migration is the lack of discovery or that lack of inventory about your environment. And it's getting partially through migrating something and then realizing that there was some dependency that was unknown, or there was some interdependency between applications that wasn't flushed out ahead of time.
Gotcha. I always hear migrate and modernize linked together. Can you briefly explain the modernization process?
Yeah, modernization usually refers to, going back to those 6 R's, it usually refers to either re-platforming or refactoring. And so again, re-platforming was maybe taking some of your databases from running on bare servers to a managed service like RDS or Aurora. And then again, refactoring would be making code changes in your application or architecture modifications to make it or to utilize more cloud native features.
How can I calculate future costs of moving to the cloud?
A good place to start here would be one is look at that inventory that we talked about. First, a good place to start is that inventory and look at your current cost. Things like how much are you, metrics of data usage and CPU usage, and then calculate what it's going to cost to run in the cloud. And AWS has some tools for that as well. There's one here. It's a good place to start is the AWS pricing calculator. It's at calculator.aws. And here you can start building an estimate, using that information that you gathered about your inventory and your current usage, and start building out what you think it's going to cost in the cloud. And this is something we often do as part of our migration projects, both in the pre-sale process and during the project, so you have a good idea of what it's going to cost to run in the cloud. And I might add here, there's also cost associated with migrating to the cloud, whether you're using a third party or a partner like us to help migrate, or you're doing it yourself. There's the cost of the labor to do it. There's the running dual environments while you're migrating. And then there's the cost after migration of just the different operating models.
Okay. Why should I choose the AWS cloud versus other providers?
Well, AWS has kind of been the leader for many years. They're the ones that kind of revolutionized cloud computing. They've been around in this game longer than anyone else. They have the best reliability out there. When you look at downtime of cloud providers, that's a big factor there. Their services are very mature, and again, they've been operating longer than anyone else, and so they're battle proven services. And cost is another good reason to choose AWS. They're very cost competitive compared to other cloud providers.
How do I prioritize which workloads should be migrated first?
For multi-stage migrations, typically we look at, like I mentioned before, a landing zone first. Either a landing zone or something like control tower, and then start moving maybe segmented workloads that are not connected to other applications. Or another approach is to move your shared services first, things that are very interconnected, and actually get those into your cloud environment first.
Excellent. Well, I think we're up against the clock at this point, but certainly if anyone has any more questions, feel free to schedule a consultation with our solutions architects by simply reaching out to sales@clearscale.com. Again, a very generous thank you to Robert for taking the time to help with today's event. And hopefully we answered a few of your questions and provided some quality information on migration. Thank you again for watching, and we hope to talk migrations with you again soon. Thanks, everybody.